Thank you very much. Just to confirm something, Mr. Attorney General, can you confirm to this committee, as you did earlier before the House Judiciary Committee, that the purpose of the memo that you were just discussing with Senator Cornyn is to have meetings to discuss whether there's a problem, to discuss strategies, to discuss whether local law enforcement needs assistance or doesn't need assistance? Was that the purpose of it?
Yes, I thank you for making that point, Senator. I say that in the memo that the purpose of the memo is to convene meetings with federal, state, and local tribal leaders, and to facilitate discussions of strategies for addressing threats, to assess the question, and to open lines of communication about such threats.
Thank you. I want to move to some other threats, and that is a hearing that actually Senator Blunt and I had yesterday. It was a bipartisan hearing. We both called witnesses. It was before the Rules Committee, and it was with both Republican and Democratic election officials. The Attorney General of Arizona, a Republican local official in Philadelphia, and they told stories that horrified senators on both sides of the aisle. The Philadelphia election official, commissioner, local election official, had been sent letters basically saying that they were going to kill him and his 3 kids, naming the kids, as well as putting his house and his address out there. Katie Hobbs, the Attorney General of Arizona, received a voicemail saying, "I am a hunter and I think you should be hunted. You will never be safe in Arizona again." Could you talk about what's going on with threats against election workers? By the way, we had the Republican Secretary of State from Kentucky talked about the fact that it has been difficult. They are losing in many jurisdictions across the country. They don't have enough election workers because people are afraid. And we don't have to discuss at length where these threats are coming from. I just want to have election officials. I want to have a functioning democracy. Can you provide an update on the Election Threats Task Force and talk about the kind of threats we're seeing to election officials?
Yes, Senator. Very much like the circumstances with respect to the school boards, when the National School Board Association wrote us a letter advising of threats of violence and violence. Earlier this year, we received communications from the National Association of Secretaries of State and the National Association of Election Administrators raising concerns about threats of violence and violence in that area. Soon thereafter, I met virtually, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, with a large number of election administrators and Secretary of States, where they recounted the kind of threats that you're talking about. And that led us to establish a task force, which again coordinated efforts between the federal law enforcement agencies, U.S. attorneys' offices, and state and local law enforcement across the country. It is the case that many of those kind of threats can be handled by state and local law enforcement, and should be where they're capable of doing that. But the federal government has an important role, as you say, in protecting our democracy and protecting against threats against public officials. And so that is an ongoing task force evaluating threats in that particular area.
Thank you. Thank you. To another area, Chair of the Competition Policy and Antitrust Subcommittee, I've urged the Justice Department to make antitrust enforcement a top priority. We recently had a nominations hearing for Jonathan Cantor. That seems to be moving ahead. And I support the division's enforcement efforts, including I know they're preparing for 18 trials, which is the most in decades. And could you talk about the antitrust budget? Senator Grassley and I have passed a bill with the support of the members of this committee to add some additional resources to the antitrust division. Senator Lee and I have held numerous very informative hearings about various issues related to antitrust. Could you talk about what's happening there?
Yes. The Justice Department is very much committed. As I said, it's a key focus of our attention. antitrust enforcement because it's essential for consumer well-being and for the well-being of our citizens. We have aggressively moved in this area. We've already stopped a merger of two of the top three largest international insurance brokers. We have, as you say, continued, we are in the middle of trials, criminal trials with respect to price fixing and market allocation. We have the ongoing matter involving exclusionary conduct in the Google case. We are looking, we have investigations and attention in many areas from healthcare to agriculture to allocations within labor markets.
Could I just ask you, we were talking about the criminal cases, could giving the antitrust agencies authorities to seek substantial civil fines for Sherman Act violations help enforcers deter anti-competitive conduct?
I'm sorry.
Civil fines, would that be helpful?
Yes, having the ability to seek civil fines as well would be helpful. Of course, if we succeed in a criminal case, the follow-on civil cases become quite easy, as I know from my own antitrust practice. But we are down in the number of attorneys in the antitrust division considerably, and we need an expansion. That's why we've asked for a 9% increase. Total increase of $201 million in our FY22 budget.
Okay.
The number of mergers has skyrocketed, and the number of people we have in the division evaluating those mergers has decreased. We need help in that regard.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the bipartisan work we've done in this committee on that front. Last question, in July, the department announced that it was adopting a new policy that restricts the use of compulsory process to obtain information from members of the news media acting within the scope of news gathering activities, an issue we discussed, you and I discussed at your confirmation hearing. As a part of that announcement, you asked the Deputy Attorney General to undertake a review process to further explain, develop, and codify the policy. Can you provide an update on the steps the Deputy Attorney General has taken to ensure that the new policy is implemented?
Yeah, so issuing a memo is good, and it controls the Justice Department now. The next step, though, is to have a regulation, which will give us some greater permanence, and the next step after that would be legislation, which Justice Department supports. On what the Deputy Attorney General is doing now is trying to formulate the general outlines of my memorandum into a regulation which can replace the current pretty detailed regulations that we have. That's what she's involved in right now.
Excellent. Thank you very much.